Welcome to my channel, Sequential Geek. I be that Sequential Geek, y'all. What it is, what it will be. Alien. That's right. Welcome to my Mega Alien Comic Book Haul 69, Part 21. This huge haul that I got. I wasn't sure if I was going to call this like a spotlight or what, but 95% of these comics I just bought in the past couple months, 3 months, I've been setting aside for this video. I want to do video, mainly going to be like an Aliens primer. Then, after just having so much fun gathering data upon data upon data, I ended up with like dozens of pages of notes. This is to follow up with Comic Book Haul 51. If you want just like the Cliff Notes version of all this, check out like the first 14 minutes of Comic Book Haul 51, titled A Four-Shop Haul Crawl, Bit of Aliens Lore. If you check out that video, it's the beginning of it. Save yourself some time. Now, I got data. Like, I like Aliens, Predator, Aliens versus Predator, but I didn't realize how much I did not know. And there's a lot of info just about the 3 C's, chronology, collectability, characters, key to the mythos, and you got creators, you got cosmic tropes. So that's like at least 6. So, the 7th one's free. 7 C's. You see? 7. You know how the song goes? 7 C's sitting on a branch.
7 chipmunks twirling on a branch, eating lots of sunflowers on my uncle's ranch.
Bam, it all started. This is what got the video going. This anthology, Dark Horse Presents, had a 3-part story arc, culminated with the first meeting of aliens and predators. AVP never existed until this comic book right here. Both the properties are owned by 20th Century Fox, but it was the 2 creators, Mike Richardson, he's the founder, CEO, owner of Dark Horse Comics. Him and fellow editor, writer Chris Warner, who's also an artist, came up with this idea. Mike said that it was actually Chris that thought of combining 2 licenses that they already had, Aliens and Predator, for this story. So really, at the end of the day, I guess this is all thanks to Chris Warner. Now, this story is written by Randy Stradley, pencils by Philip Norwood. The covers are by Chris Warner. So this is issue 36. This is the only one with a B cover. The B cover is by Dave Dorman right here. This painting, Dave Dorman's known for doing a lot of Star Wars cover paintings. So that's Dave Dorman, this one-off B cover for issue 36. But this is by Chris Warner here. And this issue 36 is the first time Aliens and Predator meet. It's also the first cover of Aliens versus Predator. And it's the first to bear the title Aliens versus Predator. So the first 2 parts to this 3-issue story arc, this anthology, are right here. Issue 34 on the left, 35 on the right. This one's centered on the alien queen, and then this one's centered on the predators, how their decision-making processes work. So get into that in a little bit. So I wanted to stress how this is going to be a primer on the history of aliens. That's like well over the majority of this video. Where did it all come from? What exactly is the Dark Horse Comics Female War Trilogy? What is that exactly? And then get into a large chunk remaining will be Aliens versus Predator, in particular Machiko Noguchi. And then there'll be like a last, 20% of this video, 30% maybe, of just some key stories that have to do with some of these cosmic tropes with aliens and the key characters involved with that. So let's get on with this mega AVP haul. And I'd also like to pose questions. Let me know what I missed. Let me know if I got a date wrong, a name wrong, some reference that you think has just recently been updated, changed with the whole current publication of Aliens and Aliens versus Predator, because this is going to cover, the impetus of it all until the mid-90s. As far as Predator goes, I'm focusing on Aliens and Aliens versus Predator. There's some Predator information in here, of course, as well. I love them both. Had such a great time gathering all this data. I want to give mad props to the website avp.fandom.com. In the description, there'll be loads of links. You guys are going to have fun checking out. But I plagiarized the hell out of that website, avp.fandom.com. Like, for example, for almost 30 years, Dark Horse was essentially the sole publisher of Aliens vs. Predator comics. During that time, they owned the rights to Alien vs. Predator comics. Dark Horse published 25 different Aliens vs. Predator stories. Purchase of 20th Century Fox by the Walt Disney Company in 2019. Yes. So sorry I had to say that. The license to publish Aliens vs. Predator comics moved to former Marvel Comics. Still referred to, though, today as actually Marvel Comics. Dark Horse's involvement with the franchise is no more. Publication of the ongoing series Aliens vs. Predator Thicker Than Blood was affected. Although the comic was ultimately completed as a trade paperback release, the final Aliens vs. Predator release from Dark Horse was Thicker Than Blood. First issue, December 2019, and the second issue, January 2020. Now, the why and the who of it all, right? Well before we're talking Dark Horse Comics was even founded. We're talking now, if you want to get into why and who, we're really going to reach now, 1974, the when of it all. And this information I'm attributing to archive.factordaily.com. Please check out the rest of that link in the description. In 1974, a French consortium bought the movie rights to Frank Herbert's science fiction masterwork, Dune. Avant-garde Chilean-French director Alejandro Jodorowsky was spearheading the project. This planned 10-hour film was to star the surrealist Salvador Dali as the Emperor, Mick Jagger, and Orson Welles. I'm not showing any of those pictures, even though the music was supposed to be by Pink Floyd. Sounds pretty fucking epic. No, I want to show actually 3 people that met. These people met. They were part of the pre-production crew. They all met each other for the first time. We're talking up-and-coming scriptwriter Dan O'Bannon, designer H.R. Geiger, and writer, co-producer Ron Shissett. Sorry for getting the pronunciations off throughout this video. Dan O'Bannon was to be in charge of special effects for Dune, and H.R. Geiger, known to be this Swiss artist, always dressing in black, preferring to stay in the shadows, literally. He designed all the architecture for Dune, such as Giedi Prime, and also the sandworms of Arrakis. Here's a photo of both O'Bannon on the left with H.R. Geiger. The book Necronomicon. It's 3 years after they met in that pre-production for Dune. It's published in 1977 originally, and it's the first major publication, a compendium of images by Swiss artist H.R. Geiger. He was born in Switzerland in 1940, by the way, and it's the images in this book, as you can see, are a huge inspiration. The development of the movie Alien. Check out more info at screenrant.com. In particular, the link I have in the description about the space jockeys. Dan O'Bannon, by the way, is no relation to Rosanna Dana. Rosanna Dana. Dan O'Bannon, born September 30th, 1946 in St. Louis, Missouri, USA. Died, unfortunately, in December 2009 in LA, California, of Crohn's disease. Dan O'Bannon was inspired at an early age by EC Comics like Tales from the Crypt and old horror films that he saw while growing up in St. Louis, Missouri, USA. He even wrote a few stories for Heavy Metal magazine, by the way. Dan O'Bannon got his start when he and John Carpenter collaborated on the cult sci-fi film Dark Star in 1974. It's a shitty, lame movie, amateur by today's standards, but back then it was considered pre-Star Wars modernity science fiction. For example, to depict the transit of the Dark Star into hyperspace, O'Bannon devised an animated effect in which the stars in the background turn into streaks of light while the ship appears to be motionless. He achieved this by tracking the camera while leaving the shutter open. Budget of Dark Star was $60K. Music by John Carpenter, produced by John Carpenter, starring Dan O'Bannon. Yep. Dan O'Bannon. He was retained to supervise, by the way, the special effects of Alejandro Jodorowsky's production of Frank Herbert's Dune. Dune fell apart in 1976. The movie was never made. Major Hollywood studios were wary of financing a picture with Jodorowsky as director. And O'Bannon's role is prominently featured in the 2013 documentary Jodorowsky's Dune. Please check that out. The collapse of Dune left O'Bannon broke, homeless, and dependent on friends for his survival. According to The Guardian, quote, George Lucas was impressed enough with Dan's hand-animated faux computer screen graphics to hire him to do similar work on Star Wars. But otherwise, this was an incredibly lean period for him, unquote. So Dan eventually abandoned technical film work for script writing, and Dan O'Bannon ended up living with his friend, Ronald Shusett. Both of them together, Ronald Shusett and Dan O'Bannon, came up with the story for Dan O'Bannon's career-making film, originally titled Star Beast. He wrote the screenplay and supervised the visuals. As well, Dan O'Bannon did the same for a few years later, that 1981 movie, Heavy Metal, that animated movie. After the production of Dune fell through in Europe, Dan O'Bannon returned to the United States to finish developing the script for Star Beast. And it wasn't until later, thanks to the success of this movie, where Dan O'Bannon directed his first film, Return of the Living Dead, in 1985, FYI. But overall, his films are known for having these really interesting, insightful psychological interpretations and subtexts for the development of his characters and the plots. So that brings us to 1979, Alien, the movie, content rating R. Let's get into the cast info here a little bit. Originally, I'd like to note that the director was Walter Hill of The Warriors, and after he got replaced with director Ridley Scott, it was Ridley Scott that made a couple of changes, because originally the character Lambert, that was played by Veronica Cartwright. She was known for being in the movie The Birds in 1965. So her role was originally penned by Dan O'Bannon to be the sole survivor, to be the hero of the movie. So after Ridley Scott entered in as the director, he made some changes, and he had Sigourney Weaver's character, Warrant Officer Ripley, become the main hero, because he found just the way that character was written to be more appropriate to be the hero. And then just says here, Sigourney Weaver was a Broadway dancer. And just, I guess, I could see her stature as well as her acting ability definitely being more suited to be the lead actor in this movie. So kudos to Ridley Scott for that. And then also it was Ridley Scott that requested H.R. Geiger to create that pilot. He did up that whole space jockey scene. That's Ridley Scott, which is actually really overlooked character throughout the whole aliens mythos. When people discuss aliens, because you got this couple of main characters here, the aliens, right? And then this space jockey who is not an engineer. He's not one of those like ancient Roman marble looking statues from, what was it, Prometheus. These space jockeys are a separate race. My point is like the aliens, they can communicate telepathically. Get into that in a little bit. But that scene with the space jockey having that, opening inside of its chest, hinting towards the face hugger, the chest burster, it was that whole creation of the space jockey. It was not originally from H.R. Geiger. That was a Ridley Scott call, having that space pilot being created, designed by H.R. Geiger. So back to that whole point with the psychological interpretation, subtext. I just thought it was interesting how the character that was played by Ian Holm, Ash. Sorry, I don't know why I said that. But my point is how, like, what is this? This came out in 1979. That's 111 years after the 14th Amendment that said corporations can be people. And so here we got Ian Holm, the scientist, playing Fauci. Ash. I don't know why I keep saying Fauci. I'm so sorry. Nothing related to any of this. But yeah, Ian Holm, his character is a synthezoid. That's a corporation. And just thought that's an interesting touch right there. That's an actual person as a corporation. Corporation as a synthetic person. Played by Sir Ian Holm. And also would like to point out the casting choice of John Hurt. Yeah, did they choose him to have the face hugger because of his last name? I wonder. In addition, check out this amazing photograph. Talk about like the best of times, living life right here. It's a great black and white. Harry Dean, avenge me. Stanton. You got Yaphet Kotto. His character's backstory, by the way, is really interesting because he was a prisoner of war and ended up creating his own EEV, emergency escape vehicle, to get the fuck out. There's Veronica Cartwright and Mr. Scarrett at the 1979 Aliens rap party. Good times right there. And the character evolution, I would just like to point out, common trope throughout these movies is how, in this instance, as well as in your Dark Horse comics, all right, yeah, you got truckers that are going off on a discussion in the first two chapters right here, because the aliens aren't talking to predators, they're not speaking English, so it's got kind of like a narration going on where you have this food processing plant, which is just this huge mass that is being towed by a small ship. Think of it like they're truckers, right? So you have this massive trailer that makes up really like 90% of what you see. And then there's like this small ship that's like the truck, okay, that's pulling it all. That's the same thing that you see in the first Aliens movie when it detached to go down to the surface of LV-426, just as you have the Lecter where the two pilots are talking in this, and that is named after Hannibal Lecter, by the way, that ship in this Aliens versus Predator for story arc. And they're talking, I'll get into that in a minute, but I just wanted to note how one of the tropes is you have people that are just survivors in general. They're like either like a trucker, or they're like your first line grunts in the military, like in that second Aliens movie, or they're the ranchers that are later seen in the Aliens versus Predator movie comic book series that I'll show in a minute. This is the second issue of Aliens versus Predator, and that takes place on Ryushi, that planet, which I'll get into. But those people are ranchers, right? So you got your people that are just like that concept of being a survivor, just kind of doing enough to get by. Yeah, saving away, you got your side hustle, whatever, and then themselves having to be turned into some type of like, post-traumatic stress syndrome survivor of an attack of like, who the fuck knows what's going on. Now they got to get into this, I got this mode of like this proactive aggressor, like a real, where the rubber meets the road, back in the caveman days survivor. So that's like a common trope I just like to point out with these alien stories that's perpetuated. You've got that, and then you have your corporation, your synthetic person that you're not quite sure who it is. And if if it's not an actual synthezoid, in a lot of the comic book stories, the trope is just the corporations are sending in some type of secret agent, a saboteur, somebody to throw a wrench in the gears of your plot expectations. So, and to move on into the mythos, the backstory of these companies that I'm referring to, these evil corporations, and just the moon, LV-426, and where all this stuff takes place. I also think it's cool to get into like some of this fictional backstory that you can find at avp.fandom.com. Like, be careful. All right. And really, I think, like I was saying, I'm wondering, I haven't opened this up, it's in too nice a condition, but like right there is probably the Nostromo. And then the rest of this is what it's hauling. Would be pretty much my point, what I'm getting at. All right, now delving into the fictional history behind these companies I'm referencing from avp.fandom.com. It's just amazing. Just the wealth of knowledge. I like mythology, getting into some of the technicalities of a character's history, whatever you want, however you want to put it. But at avp.fandom.com, I found some interesting lore leading up to all of these stories, some backstory that I hope you all find fun to hear. For example, this is the year 2122, okay? That's the year the 1979 movie occurs. Now, check this out. I love this info. Terraforming of Luna began in the year 2031 by the Wayland Corp. Oh boy. Right, I said the Wayland Corp. The Wayland Corp. Now, be aware, let me just say this real quick. I hope I can get this down right. But before Aliens, Covenant, and Prometheus, before those movies, you've got Wayland Industries. And Wayland Industries was founded by that actor Lance Henriksen. Now his character played in the 2004 movie Aliens vs. Predator. That man is Charles Bishop Wayland, played by Lance Henriksen. As you can see, his company, however it developed, that I'll get into in a few moments here, one of its products, a synthezoid, they kept in his likeness as they depicted in the movie Aliens in 1986. All right. But that is Wayland Industries, okay? Wayland Industries, founded by Charles Bishop Wayland, played by Lance Henriksen, sometime in the early 21st century, is not the same company that's in the Prometheus and Covenant movies. That guy, they changed the history and they made that Wayland Corp, all right? And that's founded by Sir Peter Wayland from October 2012 to 2099. It's a real interesting backstory with that guy. It's played by the actor Guy Pearce. Real interesting backstory about how like he invented the first atmospheric processor to create atmosphere on other planets. He devised a way to safely freeze human beings for long-term space travel and so forth. So that character that's played by Guy Pearce is Sir Peter Wayland, and he represents Wayland Corp. And that guy is part of the whole Covenant Prometheus movie spinoffs. I'm talking about not Guy Pearce. I'm talking about Lance Henriksen's character, who is Charles Bishop Wayland from Wayland Industries. Wayland Corp, that like aqua blue colored, it's not what I'm talking about in my future references. Terraforming of Luna began in 2031 by Wayland Corp. Good way to remember that is even in today's, if you want to call it real life, in our modern day history, we have the Artemis program, right, through NASA, like the sister program to the Apollo program. I think In mythology, Artemis is his sister. So that's our new initiative to return to the moon, this time permanently. And we plan on doing that by around 2030. And at the same time, we also plan on having the first person on Mars, right? I think SpaceX wants to compete with NASA. Yeah, by around 2031, just like with this timeline, the terraforming of Luna, this time it's the first colony on the moon, begins. All right, just to help you remember. Ellen Ripley, she is born in Olympia, this lunar colony, on January 7th, 2092. So now that's like 61 years later. Just trying to give everybody like a reference here, okay? Listen to what I'm getting at. This is just, for me, this is just some interesting stuff. So Ellen Ripley, she's born in Olympia on January 7th, 2092, right? Like 61 or something years later. Now, check this out about some of these events that happened around the time that she was born, because a couple years after she was born, when she was around 2 years old, right, on lunar colony in 2094, per avp.phantom.com, there's an outbreak of an XMB virus on Earth's moon that forces the Olympia colony on Luna to be quarantined for 16 years. Advanced treatments, interesting, they say treatments, allow for anyone testing negative, right? Not vaccines, treatments. Sorry, I had to say it. Advanced treatments allow for anyone testing negative to leave the colony. And the virus is eventually defeated by April 18th, 2110. So at that point, Ellen Ripley's like 18 years old. It says, although nothing is ever proven, evidence suggests this group of people called the Earth Savers were responsible. Now, it's like, I don't know if you want to call it a cult or what, but these people, the Earth Savers, they started this outbreak in 2094, lasted for 16 years, crippled that development of the colony on Luna pretty much. And the reason that they did it is because they believe that humans need to have a low galactic profile, so to speak. They're afraid of being noticed by other races that will basically take over and ruin the human race. So that was part of their effort to slow down the expansion of humanity's presence in the galaxy until we're able to do it in a more stealthy manner, I guess, until we have a higher level of technology to handle the consequences of being seen by an advanced race like the space jockeys. All right, we'll get to that. Now, what else happened around 2094, right? Thinking of some cause and effect. Interesting too, though, the year that Ellen Ripley was born, 2092, the Female War trilogy ends 100 years after that. It's around 2192, I believe. Huh. And as I was saying, around 2094, you had a lot of catalysts for change, like this Earth Savers group, expansion of humans in the galaxy. So man, by this point, has developed the 3-world empire. And by the time the virus outbreak is settled in 2110, it will already have been a few years into another large socioeconomic bloc called the United Americas. So check this out. 2094, the Earth Savers did their little terrorist attack for the XMB virus on the lunar colony. In the year 2088, you have the formation of the 3-world empire that is a precursor to the merger of Wayland and Yutani corporations. The 3-world empire, it's the first of the so-called conglomerate nations, like I said, forming in 2088, a full 15 years before its nearest equivalent, the United Americas, which formed in 2103. As a result, the 3WE, the 3-world empire, pioneered space exploration. They established most of the long-term colonies in the inner systems, becoming the most technologically prosperous interstellar superpower of its time because it has set up its presence on Earth, Mars, and the moon of Saturn, Titan. Those were the first 3 major colonies. Even before its formation, founding members, the United Kingdom and Japan, had led the way in space exploration and settlement technologies, primarily through the British Wayland Corp and the Japanese Yutani Corporation, both of which became the first companies to construct human colonies and other planetary bodies within the Sol system. So I know I just said Wayland Corp, but that's per avp.com. In any case, like I said, I'm referring to Wayland Industries, founded by Charles Bishop Wayland, because these comics that I'm working with here are up until like the mid-90s. Now, 2103, you have the United Americas, a socioeconomic bloc of North America, Central America, and South America, and it is home to the United Americas Allied Command, the UAAC, which operates both the United States Colony Marine Corps, which was established in 2101 actually, and it also operates the UAORDF, that is the United Americas Outer Rim Defense Fleet. Listen up, okay? I said that Earth War ends in 2192, right? That female war trilogy, the last story arc is called Earth War. That takes place around 2192. A few years before that, in 2187, the United States Colonial Marine Corps, eventually his name is changed to the United Americas Colonial Marine Corps in 2187. Just wanted to mention that. So that pretty much goes on around the time the last two parts of the female war take place. Okay, so 2088, you got the formation of the Three World Empire. 2094, you got the Earth Savers doing their little XMB virus outbreak on the lunar colony Olympia, where Ellen Ripley had to stay quarantined until she was 18. 2101, we got the formation of the United States Colonial Marine Corps. 2103, the United Americas are formed. Now, listen. I said that the United Americas is the home to the United Americas Allied Command, which operates the United States Colonial Marine Corps, and the United Americas Orbital Rim Defense Fleet. That name changes in the year 2109. Yeah, they lose that United Americas at the beginning of it. It ends up after this huge travesty, this huge tragic event that happens on planet Thetis, right? Thetis, y'all. Thetis, y'all. Thetis, in the year 2109. Why should that name sound familiar to you? Because in the year 2122, this movie, this whole transport here, this cargo, was on its way to planet Thetis. In the year 2122, at this point, Warrant Officer Ripley is around the 30 years old. The Nostromo, right, was trailing this load in 2122 on its way to planet Thetis. Well, 13 years earlier, in the year 2109, there was a miners' revolt over poor living conditions on the planet Thetis. This forced the United Americas to deploy the UAS Archangel, a UAORD, a UORD troop carrier, captained by none other than Arthur Dallas, played by Tom Skerritt. Yup, on a so-called peacekeeping mission to Thetis. Yet, on December 25th, 2109, for unknown classified reasons, the Archangel, that UAORD troop carrier, crashed into an atmospheric processor, destroying it and killing 15,293 colonists. Because of that travesty, because of that event, the name just got changed to Outer Rim Defense Fleet. I wonder, because I guess they just ended up having to separate resources and they didn't trust because of this huge catastrophe at the hands of Captain Arthur Dallas, who ended up being played by Tom Skerritt. They had to remove United Americas. Yeah, it was called the United Americas Orbital Defense Fleet. So they had to remove United Americas. Wow. Because there's another, one more symbol I want to show here. The Independent Core System Colonies. The ICSC. Since the 2080s, Another thing that occurred at the same time as a three-world empire was formed, just before the United Americas. Since the 2080s, the ICSC, Independent Core System Colonies, made up a loose conglomerate of privately owned human worlds located in the core systems of the New Eden sector. All colony worlds in the ICSC had their own independent governments, many of which were overseen by corporations. So I'm just kind of attributing this to, like, you had your inner rings of um, sun systems, planets, and then I don't know, maybe I'm talking like a presence in the Oort cloud. I'm not sure exactly, but or more just in general, like outer rim areas of the galaxy. They had to end up having their own defense fleet, I guess. They removed the UA, and now it's just outer rim defense fleet. Somebody fucked up, and Arthur Dallas was there. So now let's cut to 2122, right? Tom Skerritt, when he woke all them up, he's telling them that they haven't reached Thetis yet. Kind of makes you wonder, he knew what the hell was going on. Did Dallas know about that derelict? Right? Did he know about LV-426 more than just some type of warning signal being emanated from it? Codename Origin, also known as the alien derelict. Also, it's been referred to as an engineer juggernaut class vessel at avp.fandom.com. But they're not the engineers. They're a separate race. These green-skinned dudes that are like super advanced technology, as depicted a little bit in the third part, Earth War, but you can see them in the first part, more in Aliens, and in particular, as I will show you a little bit, the last two issues, 5 and 6, you can get like a live appearance of the pilots, is what they're called, those guys that are in those chairs. They're revealed to be these separate race, not the engineers, but they're the pilots of that like horseshoe looking ship that crashed on LV-426. So their first appearance alive, I would say, would be in issue 5 and 6 here. So issue 5, and then the first appearance in comics would be the petrified carcass of it in this remake of the movie right here from 1979. The warning signal being found by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. That was their ship, the Nostromo. And they actually believed that derelict ship, that's what it's called, the derelict, to have crashed there several millennia prior to the arrival of the Nostromo. It's like, wow. Yeah, I love learning this type of lore. Sorry, I mean, damn, I love getting into this type of information. Just to see that there's a reference saying how this ship had crashed thousands of years earlier, and then getting the backstory about how Arthur Dallas was a captain of this ship that had to be crashed into the planet that they were heading towards in this story, Thetis, killing over 15,000 colonists for unknown reasons. Oh, man. There's always something interesting like that at avp.fandom.com. Some tidbit of a backstory that could be its own television series or, spin-off film, whatever. Now, the setting of this movie takes place at the moon, which has a name, Acheron, otherwise known as LV-426. We didn't find out until the final chapter in the Earth War series. Show this in a minute. But we didn't find out until this story, with art by Sam Keith, how the corporation, Weyland-Yutani, and then also later you find out, Bionationals involved, they already had access to the body cam footage of John Hurt's character that had the face hugger attached to him during this story. So in 1986, when the company was trying to get information out of Ellen Ripley, they were totally gaslighting the shit out of her. They knew what the fuck was going on. That was 57 years after these events, that 1986 movie, Aliens. So they knew what the fuck was going on. For your reference, that moon, Acheron, that's the setting of the beginning of the 1979 Alien movie. It's the setting of the second Aliens movie by James Cameron. Astronomically, it's referenced as LV426. The moon's name is Acheron. The word Acheron is after one of the rivers that wound through the netherworld, translated as River of Pain in ancient Greek mythology. Acheron. That is the name of the moon LV426, where the beginning of the Alien movie in 1979 takes place, in the year 2122. And it's also the setting for the Aliens movie, the second movie from 1986 that takes place 57 years later, 2179, 100 years after this movie actually takes place. Very cool. The moon, Acheron, River of Pain. It orbits the ringed gas giant Calpamos, which is part of the Zeta II Reticuli system, the fourth planet. I suppose Zeta II meaning binary star system then. The planet Calpamos has 3 moons, including LV223 and Acheron, LV426, 39 light years away from Earth. Hadley's Hope, by the way, in the year 2179, housed 158 people, and it went down to 1. Rebecca Jordan. It was assumed that the derelict was destroyed after the events of Aliens, when in 2179, the atmospheric processing plant at the nearby colony of Hadley's Hope exploded. The derelict ship was assumed to have been destroyed. So now a little bit of legacy data on the Heavy Metal magazine comic book, because right here you got the magazine from 1979. This came out in June 1979, based on the 20th Century Fox science fiction hit Alien. So it's the comic book adaptation of the movie, obviously. So we're talking the first comic book appearance of Ellen Ripley, the first comic book appearance of the aliens, first comic book appearance of a synthezoid, first comic book appearance of LV426. None of these characters, none of these concepts are ever published again in comic book form until a couple years after Dark Horse is founded. Now, as far as the heavy metal publication of Alien, the movie adaptation called Alien, the Illustrated Story by Archie Goodwin, art by Walter Simonson. To promote this, Heavy Metal Magazine, Volume 3, Issue 1, in May 1979, as part of that anthology, they printed the first 8 pages of this story. And then in Heavy Metal Magazine, Volume 3, Number 2, they printed the next 8 pages as a teaser to promote this one-shot magazine movie adaptation of Alien, 1979. Heavy Metal, by the way, started in 1974 as an American version of the French science fiction anthology, Metal Hurlant, literally translated as Howling Metal, which was also a platform for one of the main contributors to the development of Dune during that pre-production process, Mobius. Mobius was also one of the contributing designers to the Dune pre-production, Jodorowsky's Dune adaptation. The comic adaptation of Alien was reprinted and re-released by Titan Comics in 2012. In October 2012, you got the hardcover, oversized 13x7 format edition that was released under the title The Original Art Edition. Titan Comics produced 2,000 of these with an extra inserted page that has the signature and illustration by Walter Simonson, by the artist. He did an illustration of a xenomorph on an inside page along with his signature. So got some original artwork edition going on there. The only addition that was made to the scanned images of his original artwork is the comics lettering. Of the creative team that worked on this comic, I also would like to note that artist Simonson did return working on an Aliens comic book, but it wasn't until end of Dark Horse's term publishing Aliens comics. when Walt Simonson did the B covers for Alien, the original screenplay that came out in 2020. It was a limited series that is credited to be written by Dan O'Bannon. Cristiano Sykes is credited as doing the interpretation of the script, with Jeremy Balbi as the interior artist. He's doing the A covers with Walter Simonson doing the B covers on that comic book adaptation of Dan O'Bannon's original script for Alien. So that limited series was in 2020, and that was the only time Walt Simonson ever returned working on an Aliens comic, as far as I know. All right, so check this out. Here's some unofficial, non-recognized, non-authorized history, non-canon history that has to do with Alien. For example, 1980, the Italian director created an unofficial Aliens movie called Contamination, aka Alien Contamination, or Toxic Spawn, or Larva. This was a 1980 science fiction horror film directed by Luigi Cozzi and starring Ian McCulloch. The film was about an alien cyclops creature that uses human agents to place eggs all over the Earth. So that information I got from en.wikipedia.org. Check out the links below because there's some YouTube links that show the trailer for this movie. Crazy. This Italian director dug it so much in 1980, he created his own sequel. There's also Do Aliens Dream? That's a comic book short story that was published by Argus House in its United Kingdom-based Skeleton Crew magazine, Volume 2, Issue Number 2, from July 1990. It was published in black and white, as Dark Horse Comics had no involvement with Do Aliens Dream. They do not hold the rights to it, and it is not considered part of the company's Aliens Comics line. There was also a 1992 Eclipse comic book, Illegal Aliens, September 1992. And then there was 1992 Dark Horse 13-issue mini comic with Kenner Toys. And those comics were titled Aliens Space Marines. They were considered outside of the continuity, but influenced by the 1986 Aliens movie. And then also in 1992, check out the link below. There's a reprint down below I got a link for this Hungarian comic book. It came out in the early 90s. I'm not exactly sure when, but obviously, it's not licensed. It's unofficial, but it's the only direct full comic adaptation of James Cameron's Aliens movie. Aside from Newt's Tale that came out in the same year, 1992. So you've got the Hungarian comic book that's an adaptation of Aliens from 1986, but 6 years later the Hungarian comic book came out, or around that time. And then 6 years later, the same year that Aliens 3 came out, you have Newt's Tale, which not only depicts the events in the second Aliens movie, but it also has deleted scenes that include how the outbreak occurred when Rebecca Jordan, Newt, when her parents found the alien derelict ship. And then also I want to note how in Aliens issue number 5, when Newt first encounters that space jockey, when he's trying to communicate with her telepathically, it has to do with the subject of the aliens. So then she at first connects her own personal experiences with how her parents found the derelict ship and how they ended up having the facehuggers attack them. So that's depicted, the initial outbreak here in this issue with her flashback. When she was a kid, as a result, like her mind reacting to that space jockey was letting her know how he's using these aliens to subjugate planets. There's already intelligent life forms there, so to kind of like use the aliens to get rid of the populace. It's interesting. Get to that in a little bit. Okay, so this is considered canon though, right? But that Hungarian comic book is just some unofficial book I wanted to point out because it's not official, it's not licensed. And then also in 1993, you have a video game promotion called Aliens 3 Terminal Addiction. And it's a comic book short story from Dark Horse International. And that's their United Kingdom branch. They have this magazine called Aliens. And that magazine issue, I think it's 8, has a poster of this Dave Dorman Aliens versus Predator image. And then also the 3rd issue of Aliens, that Dark Horse International United Kingdom magazine. On the cover, it uses this. It's this Dave Dorman painting, just in case you wondered. But yeah, Aliens 3 Terminal Addiction is a comic book short story that came out in that Aliens magazine, their United Kingdom branch, in June 1993, illustrated by David Roach, but that's not considered canon of the main Aliens franchise or Dark Horse in the United States. FYI. So now, real quick, now we're leading up to the first chapter of the Female War, these 6 issues, right? They came out in 1988, and that is (1988). That is 2 years after Dark Horse Comics is founded by Mike Richardson. So in 1986, you've got the second Aliens movie. The first one was directed by Ridley Scott. The second one was directed by James Cameron. James Cameron co-wrote the second Aliens movie with David Giller and Walter Hill. I was briefly referenced them earlier because they also co-produced with Ron Shusett the Alien movie from 1979. James Cameron directed Aliens from 1986, distributed by 20th Century Fox, using the same setting as the original Alien movie, the moon LV-426, orbiting the gas giant Kalpamos in the Zeta-2 reticular system, as the setting for the terraforming colony of Hadley's Hope in the year 2179. So she was frozen for 57 years. The Weyland Yutani Corp, they don't believe anything she's saying, but they really know what the heck is going on because, like I said earlier, they did have access to John Hurt's body cam footage, his character Kane, when I had the face hugger attached to it in the first movie. Interesting to note that not only did the actors in the second Aliens movie had to take part in training in this boot camp by the Special Air Services, the SAS, the United Kingdom's elite Special Forces Regiment, to help them effectively portray military combat personnel on screen, but as a foundational reference for science fiction, I'd like to note that the actors playing the Colonial Marines in the second Aliens movie were required to read the Robert A. Heinlein novel, Starship Troopers. Dune is from 1965. I think this was like 1958, 59 Starship Troopers originally. Not sure, gotta look that up. Sigourney Weaver reprised her role. There she is with Michael Biehn, Colonial Marine Corporal Hicks, and he's showing her how to rock a plasma rifle because she's from like 57 years earlier. Probably needs a little how-to. The other actress to note is Carrie Henn, playing Newt, Rebecca Jordan, the sole survivor of LV-426. But then also, as I referenced earlier, Lance Henriksen. Lance Henriksen playing Bishop, and then he returned in Aliens 3, playing the guy that created Bishop, and then he plays Charles Bishop Weyland, the founder of Weyland Industries. So 1986, the same year Dark Horse Comics started as a publisher, February 4th, 1986. It's out of Milwaukee, Oregon, founded by Mike Richardson. So Mike Richardson sets up his comic book publishing company, Dark Horse Comics, in 1986. This is the same year that the second Aliens movie comes out. Yet, the same year that the first movie came out, Alien, 1979, is the year that he graduated from Portland State University. It was 1980, actually, where he started his comic book retail chain, Pegasus Books, by the way. Mike Richardson, born 1950 in the United States of America. He also knew Phil Norwood. Phil Norwood is the interior artist for the Aliens versus Predator story here, and the 4-issue limited series. Phil Norwood is involved in storyboarding for Tron and for Terminator. 1987, you had the Predator movie come out, 1 year after Dark Horse Comics was founded. So May of 1988, you have Aliens #1. This takes place like 12 years or so after Hadley's Hope, 12, 13 years. So Hadley's Hope was 2157. So now we're talking 2180, around that year. Newt is like in her early 20s, I guess. And this 6th issue, by the time the 6th issue comes out, careful. So by the time the 6th issue comes out, it is July 1989. These are written by Mark Verheiden, and Mark A. Nelson is the artist of the covers as well as the interior. $1988. Trademark 20th Century Fox. May 1988. This is a first printing. 20th Century Fox, all right. Art, Mark A. Nelson. Script, Mark Verheiden, 1 of 6. Awesome artwork. And this is comprised of two story arcs, essentially. 2 stories. It's a black and white comic. There's Newt as a young kid. She's having a flashback, and then there she is. She's at this mental institution. Like I said, this is like 10, 13 years after Hadley's Hope. She's grown up, but she's having these constant nightmares and nervous breakdowns as a result of her experiences at Hadley's Hope. Whoa, look at that price tag. XXX. 1989, in June, you have Predator, the first appearance of Predator in comic books, published by Dark Horse Comics, written by Mark Verheiden, with art by same person as the cover artist here, Chris Warner. That was the team on the first Predator comic book appearance. The second Predator movie, by the way, came out November 1990, where Kevin Peter Hall reprised his role as the Predator. So 1979, Aliens, Heavy Metal Magazine. You have the first appearance of Ripley, first appearance of a petrified space jockey, the pilot, first appearance of an alien, first appearance of a synthezoid. Can you dig it? I know you could. Aliens, Volume 1, May 1988. First appearance of Newt and Hicks in a comic book right here. And then issue 5 and 6, first appearance of the space jockey. Look at this issue number 4 cover. How fucking badass that is. Mark A. Nelson's kicking ass with this series. We'll get into some Aliens versus Predator first appearances, but just to note real quick, I would have to say first appearance of Top Knot, right? And Aliens versus Predator issue number 1, first appearance of Machiko Noguchi. Don't you know she? 1988, May, Aliens, Volume 1, Number 1, 1989. July, Aliens, Volume 1, Number 6. Bionational. That's the corporation. It's another thing I'm going to do. I'm going to mention planets that are associated with these stories, the companies that are associated with these stories, and the main characters associated with these stories. So with the 6-issue series, you've got, an older version, 10, 13 years later of Hicks and Newt. You got appearance of that telepathic space jockey later on, but then you also got Bionational is the corporation here. You got corporate espionage, sabotage. That's Peter Massey. That's that character. It's a real nut job. You also have, as depicted throughout this story and the next, the nightmares that are going on, not only with Newt. It establishes how if you've had like a serious traumatic experience with these aliens, even years later, you will be still kind of connected. You'll have still some type of like really abhorrent psychic connection, because it turns out that the Queen has this psychic connection, even from the Xenomorph homeworld. It's possible for the Queen to project her presence, if not specific thoughts. And there's also it's established in the story how the space jockey can have psychic connections with other species, with other planet races. So there's 2 story arcs that take place in the 6-issue limited series from 88 to 89. The first one is how you've got the LaSalle Bionational Corporation. It's in a bioarms race with Weyland Yutani. And they found this junket. Is the name of this one spaceship that was abandoned. And when they found it, it's infected by aliens. They show a video of this to Corporal Hicks. Like I said, this is like 13 years later, to show him what's going on because they need his help to figure out what to do next, which is essentially to go to the aliens' homeworld. How they know where the aliens' homeworld is, with this xenomorph homeworld, where it is, I'm not exactly sure how they know that, which planet it is. But the first story takes place where like how they got the video and just what happens following the events of the pilot of this junket, this abandoned ship that they found that was infected by aliens. The escape pod was missing, and then they find the pilot with a face hugger on it on Earth. They take him to Houston, Texas, and at that point, the infected pilot's chest burster gets loose. It turns out, of course, that it's a queen, and then it starts laying eggs. And if you are within 50 to 100 miles of a queen, you will start getting fucked with hardcore. You'll start getting nightmares, and the weak-willed will end up submitting to this queen's influence. A great example in the story is this religious zealot called Salvaje, and he is setting up religious broadcasts through a holographic projector that is being set up by the person that's being interrogated, tortured by the Bionational Corp. That's the first story arc. The Bionational Corp wants information. They're torturing this tech who just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And Salvaje is projecting to everyone about his message about the Church of Immaculate Incubation. He's projecting an image of the true Messiah, which is an alien drone. I don't think it's a queen, but it's an alien. And all these people think that if you let yourself get infected by an alien, which they end up attacking this bionational compound, and they get into where the queen's being stored with her eggs, and they just wait for the facehuggers to pop out and infect themselves. So they think it's going to take them to a higher level of consciousness, spiritual being, whatever. They end up starting this outbreak on Earth. Aliens outbreak. If you ever hear aliens outbreak or just outbreak, that's this. See, what happened is that you've got Aliens 1 through 6, Volume 1, all right, from 1988 to 89. And then end of 89, beginning of 90, you've got this 4-issue series called Aliens, but it's Aliens Volume 2, all right? And then you've got the third part, which is Aliens Earth War, and that's this 4-issue limited series. Okay. And then there's one more issue from Dark Horse Presents. That's the epilogue I'll show you in a minute. When the novelization of these stories occurred, because the characters, their outcomes were altered by the Aliens 3 movie in 1992. So when the novelization came out in 92, 93, they had to then try and have the characters of the story, try and stay relevant, try and stay within continuity, so they changed their names. So then Corporal Hicks became Wilkes, and Newt became Billy. Yeah. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but my point is that this story in the novelization and in the trade paperbacks and reprints, this got changed volume 1 to be called Aliens Outbreak. Volume 2 is called Aliens Nightmare Asylum. And then volume 3 is just as it's titled, Earth War. It's a badass Simon Beasley cover, by the way. No, sorry, that's a badass John Bolton cover, by the way. How am I doing on the glare? I mean, it is what it is. Like I said, there's 2 story arcs. The first one is Bionational torturing the tech that had set up the camera and had gotten involved with Salvaje. Head officer at Bionational is this Dr. Arona, this guy who tortured the tech. They get all the information about Salvaje and they figure out how the outbreak started. So now this guy, Dr. Arona, he's thinking, okay, we need to get some specimens. We need to go to the aliens' homeworld. We got to figure out how to reverse all this, how to stop this. And ultimately, Arona is thinking that if they can get an alien queen back to Earth, then she would attract all the aliens to her, and then they would end up nuking that queen. So by the end of this story arc, they're not used yet, but he's got a bunch of nuclear weapons set up around Earth to eliminate the aliens, and we'll get into that too. So 13 years in the future, we've got this corporate spy, fixer, saboteur called Patrick Massey. He's a real piece of work. He ended up killing his family when some bureaucrat sent him some message, didn't go to his personal address, so it went to his family's voicemail. They got a video message of some alien in it, and so he kills his family because they were exposed to that information. Made it look like a home invasion. So he's sent to take over this military ship, the Benedict, because the military want Hicks to come with them and figure out how to best deal with these aliens, whether they get a queen and whether they get specimens. And they showed Hicks that one video of that one junket being attacked, and so he's like, I'm in. He finds out about Newt. They're going to lobotomize her. She wasn't supposed to tell any guests about the drugs that she's been given, the doses that she's on, and their treatments. So because she broke that rule, they're going to lobotomize her. They don't believe any of the stories that she's saying, and her nightmares are getting worse. So Hicks is like, fuck this shit. I want to get Newt out of the insane asylum, put her in a cryo tube on the ship that he's about to go on, the Benedict. He stows her on board. They end up finding that she's on board later, and they say because of the gravity drive, she could have threw all the calibrations off, but then he said that he took 104 or 110 pounds of some type of dessert that they had and threw that off the ship, so the amount of mass would stay the same for the gravity drive. I like that point that they put in there, how he had to remove a certain weight off the ship that was the same weight as Newt. He had to do that before he stowed her on board, put her in a cryo tube. So that's my point, though. Time is going by because they're in these cryo tubes. And like I said, eventually by Earth War, the 3rd chapter, it's like the year 2192. Yeah, 100 years after Ripley's born, for whatever reason. They just did that. Now, before Hicks stowed Newt on board, he was trying to get some plasma rifles and ammunition to accompany him. His commanding officer, I think the guy's name was Stevens, denied him this request. Right there, that's a red flag. Because it turns out that this guy was a mole for the Bionational Corporation, and he started killing some other officers on the ship so that he could let this Bionational saboteur on board. Because the main goal of Bionational was to keep the military, the colonial marines, from getting the samples for themselves. Bionational wanted the samples. Even though the Earth has this huge outbreak going on, Bionational interrupts this operation to get a queen, and they want it all for themselves. Okay, so that's what happens. The To get to the end of the story here, for this first story arc, like I said, you've got Aliens Outbreak, Nightmare Asylum, that 4-issue limited series, and then Aliens Earth War. And that is the female war. That is the whole trilogy, the first Aliens set of stories from Dark Horse Comics. So they're aboard the military ship Benedict. Patrick Massey comes on board after their main commanding officer, the head of the ship, Stevens, ends up killing some people to let Massey on board. They force the colonial marines to go to the xenomorph homeworld and still bring back as many specimens as possible. It's a total failure, by the way. And they're all trying to escape and just get back to the Benedict. They're on the xenomorph homeworld, and they're in an APC, armored personnel carrier. And Hicks and Newt, they're trying to get the hell out of there. Newt had fallen in love with one of the colonial marines, and while he was on the alien homeworld in one of the hives, he ends up getting cut in half by one of the drones, just one of these regular aliens. They're referred to as drones or warriors. And it's revealed this soldier, this colonial marine that Newt has fallen in love with, she's been hooking up with him on their way to the alien homeworld, the xenomorph homeworld. It turns out he's a synthezoid. So he gets ripped in half. Newt carries him to their armored personnel carrier, their APC. They're trying to make it back to their transport to get them back to the Benedict off the planet. They've got no specimens. They're completely screwed. The ship is, their APC is starting to get torn apart by aliens. This is in issue number 5. And here's issue number 2. And all of a sudden, everything stops. They're no longer being attacked. It's issue number 3. They're no longer being attacked. They go and take a look outside, and hovering in the air, insert some images. Hovering in the air is the same type of race that you saw petrified in the first Aliens movie, one of those pilots of the derelict ship. They're obviously super advanced. They've got technology to neutralize the aliens. Hicks and Newt, they look outside and they see all the aliens are kind of smoldering. I don't know if he just boiled the insides or something like that, and this guy, he's got kind of like dead eyes, this space jockey, they call it, this green skinned dude. He's like floating in there. He's not saying anything. He's not reacting to them. He's just watching them. And then Newt has this psychic connection with him where initially she is shown her parents and how they found the derelict ship originally, and how the facehuggers attached themselves to her parents. And then she ends up realizing that this guy, this thing that, even though it helped them, it's really evil, and it just wants to follow them back to Earth to find out where their homeworld is so it can take over and terraform Earth. It's a really interesting aspect. It's just this cold, eerie, gnarly thing that you think is saving you, but it's just wants to follow you back home. It's the reason why it's using these aliens, so it can have some type of outbreak on a planet to disable that civilization, and then it obviously already has the technology to get rid of the aliens, so it can then terraform whichever planet it initially had sicked those aliens on. At the end of issue number 6, so in issue number 5, you got the space jockey. He saves Newt and Hicks on the alien homeworld. He shares his visions showing evil intent on following the humans to attack Earth later on. In issue number 6, Newt and Hicks, they return back to Earth. They make it back to Earth. They're in Texas, and they see just how fucked the Earth is. They realize they got to get off of Earth now. They encounter this general that had helped set up all the nukes, and he's revealing this revelation he has. I mean, everybody at this point's got like serious PTSD. The fucking sky's falling. The whole Earth is now infected by aliens. It's just everybody's fucked. And, you know, like I said, it was like around the year 2080 when this story arc happened. But then if they had to return back to Earth, you know, you have to get frozen. It takes time to go to the aliens, queen, whatever, the xenomorph homeworld and back. So I'm not sure exactly how much time has passed, because I know, like I said, it's like around the year 2192 by the time this whole story ends. And they have to leave Earth because they know that everything's infected, and you've also got these nuclear bombs that are set up all over Earth to try and get rid of the aliens. The nuclear bombs don't get set off until you find out much later in the third part, Earth War. But this one general, he's revealing how humans had their chance. That's my point. He's saying, like, we've had our chance. We totally fucked up. The reason that all this happened is because we weren't organized, and we weren't unified as a whole, as a planet. We were already divided. So he's like, we kind of had this coming. But then again, if you look back, I think that's what those Earth Savers were getting at. And so we have Newt. She has her link with the alien queen. That's further depicted in Nightmare Asylum. As well, she has her link with the space jockey, which is revealed further at the end in Earth War. And so Aliens ends this first part of the Female War trilogy with Hicks and Newt just jumping on the next ship that's heading off planet. They don't know where it's going. It's got some automated flight plan already programmed into it. And that's going to lead me into the next chapter. And that will lead us into the next part, Aliens Volume 2, 4-issue limited series, later known as Aliens Nightmare Asylum. Yeah, I had to pause this. A lot of interruptions right now, trying to work with. But Aliens Nightmare Asylum. I'm thinking this video is going to be up until Earth War ending, and then I'm going to do another one on Aliens versus Predator, and then, like I said, I'll finish up on some related story arcs that are relevant to the Aliens tropes, cosmic tropes, and then some key characters involved with that. It's probably going to be like 3 separate videos, I'm thinking. Fuck, I don't know, we'll see. This is major info here. This is already like super long. All right, so Nightmare Asylum. The first part eventually is going to be called not just Aliens Volume 1, 6 issues. This is Outbreak, Aliens Outbreak. And then the second one, 4 issues, is Aliens Nightmare Asylum. Get into those real quick. At the end of Volume 1, Aliens Outbreak, they left. They just took any random ship that they could find. So now, in this story, they're on it. They're on the ship. They don't know where it's going. They've also got what's left of Bueller. That's the soldier that Newt had fallen in love with. He got ripped in half when they were on the Xenomorph homeworld. She brought him back with him. So now, it's Bueller, that Colonial Marine, what's left of him, trying to get over the fact that he's actually not a human. He didn't even know. You got Hicks and you got Newt. They're on some type of ship. They're not sure where it's going. They just know it's military. It's military transport. There's issue 1. We're talking August 1989. Issue 2. December 1989. All of these stories are written by Mark Verheiden. The Nightmare Asylum stories, these 4 issues I'm displaying, the cover as well as the interiors are by Dennis Bovas. Not sure, but I know he's Dennis. Goes by Den Bovas. Issue 3. And we have the return of Ripley with issue 4. So we have Ellen Ripley. First appearance in comics is right here, Heavy Metal, a 1979 Alien illustrated story, the adaptation of the 1979 Alien movie. And then you have first time Ellen Ripley is in a Dark Horse comic. It's right here. It's like the last panel, issue number 4. Because what happens at the end of issue number 4, at the end of this first story arc, is at the beginning of it, they are sent to, it turns out that military transport they're on is going to a space station that's run by this guy, General Spears, and he wants to make the xenomorphs a weapon. He wants to make them docile. He wants to be able to train them. It's another common trope here. These guys can't get over the fact that they cannot train these things. And every time you do, some disaster is going to happen. So here we are. And then after Newton and Hicks escape that general, because he ends up on his transport, he wants to return to Earth and use the aliens that he has trained. He thinks that he can still bring Earth back to the humans. It's pretty much doomed. So they are in an escape pod, and they jettison themselves from the ship that General Spears is in just before he lands on Earth. And then they, in hopes that the escape pod will reach Gateway Station, this huge like city, space station that's orbiting the Earth. And they make it there, and who do they find there but Ripley? So this is the last panel of the second part of the 3-part female war. Like I said, this is the last panel of Nightmare Asylum. Issue 1, issue 2, here's issue 3, and issue 4 of volume 2, Aliens, Nightmare Asylum by Mark Verheiden. This time around, the art is by Den, is it Vias? All right, getting too many interruptions this time of the day. I gotta wait until late at night to do any more of this. So I'll finish up through Aliens Earth War up until I get to the AVP discussion. So let's finish this off, this section of my lecture, the Female War Trilogy. So we're getting now 2/3 of the way there. from 88 to 89, you had the first appearance of Newt Hicks in comic books. It's actually about like 13 years after the 1986 James Cameron movie. Now, many years have passed because they had to go to the alien xenomorph homeworld, come back, and the Earth is doomed. And here is issue 1, August 1989. Issue 2, December 1989. Look at that fucking awesome queen right there on the right. It's March 1990. On the left, I meant, excuse me. And then in May 1990, you have Volume 2, Nightmare Asylum, issue number 4, ending right here. Ripley's first appearance in Dark Horse Comics at the Gateway Earth Station. And the story continues. The third and final part, Aliens Earth War, still written by Mark Verheiden. This time, art is by Sam Keith. Amen. Those are John Bolton covers. July 1990. Aliens Earth War, issue number dose. Look at that. Aliens Earth War, issue number 3. It's about to fall over. Yeah. Aliens Earth War, issue number 4. Look at that queen. Look at that. So Ellen Ripley's back, and she has a flashback of her own. Because, Newt, she's like, where the heck have you been? And Ellen Ripley is like, well, turns out, my story continues where the Aliens movie leaves off. Yeah. So, allow me now to transition to the big book. So, this is the reprint right here of the last 2 parts, right? Because the 6-issue series, the first part, Aliens Outbreak, has its own hardcover, right? So in 2016, Dark Horse reprinted everything. There, Dark Horse, but with the original names. So this is the first time the names are back to Newt, right? Her character that was changed to Billy. Now they're reprinting everything with the names back. Because the original printings, like I said, they're called Hicks and Newt. But then in the trade back reprints, 1992 and later, because of the 1993 Aliens 3 movie, where Newt dies at the beginning of it, Hicks dies when their emergency escape vehicle crashes in that prison planet Fiorina 161. So that changes the narrative with these stories, right? Because they tried to change their names to make them relevant as if it was some type of separate story. Anyway, all of these stories, when they got reprinted with different names throughout the 90s, in 2016, Dark Horse did another reprinting of trade paperbacks and hardcovers that have their names returned back to normal, called the Original Comic Series. This blue one, this blue hardcover is 8 issues, right? It's the 4 issues of Earth War and then the 4 issues of Nightmare Asylum combined. And then you have a hardcover Aliens. It's all black. That's the volume 1. And that's all 6 issues. Got that one coming in the mail. I got this used for $25. And this had an original price of $39.99 US. I love this book. Nightmare Asylum and Earth War. Because the novelization in 92, 93, like I said, it changed that to Nightmare Asylum as opposed to just Aliens Volume 2 and Earth War, the last part. Sam Keith doing the art. Introduction. So like I said, at the end of Aliens Outbreak, the first 6 issues, they were on some ship that they just got on just to get the heck out of Dodge. They were in Texas. Newt keeps having all these nightmares. She keeps waking up hot and bothered. She is thinking she's going to have some type of sexual encounter with Hicks, and an alien erupts from it. So this is Dan Bovias. That's how you pronounce his name. This is his artwork. He did the covers and the interiors for Nightmare Asylum. And so now she's on this ship. They're heading back to where they're heading. Right. They don't know where they're going. She just knows that the outbreak has occurred on Earth. She's freaking out. And she's like, there's got to be aliens on this ship. We got to check and see. There are aliens on the ship. They end up killing them, knocking some out the air hatch. Just trying to go through this as fast as I can. She goes outside the ship to see if there's any more. Yeah. Right, it's hiding in the exhaust, whatever you want to call it. Here's Bueller. He's cut in half. What's left of him. Turns the engine on. General Spears is like, what were you doing to my specimens? And then when he finds out that who they are, he releases them. They're like no longer his prisoners. Great artwork. They find out he's trying to train the aliens, like I said. She's having constant nightmares. A serious bondage image right there. Okay, so Spears is nuts. He thinks he can train the aliens. He's wrong. He can't. Things go wrong. Some Marines, colonial Marines, they wanted to fight against Spears. Here's one that almost got free, and he kicks them back to the aliens. So Spears is nuts. His plan doesn't work. Let me just skip ahead here. She still has her thing for Bueller. The aliens, they get free. And so Bueller, because he's a machine, the aliens, they don't pay attention to him. So it allows him to get to the control panel. Also, what's interesting to note, too, I think, I don't know, that's later in the Sam Keith version. But here's Bueller. The aliens are ignoring him, so he's able to get to the main control panel of the ship and just help Newt and Hicks get free. And then there they are. This guy, the general, he's heading to Earth. He thinks he knows what he's doing. And then here's Gateway Earth. This is this huge space station orbiting Earth, and they're like warning everybody not to go to Earth. Bueller, he's leaving a message to Newt, just saying that he loves her and he ain't gonna make it. So there they are in their escape pod. General Spears' last stand on Earth. Right, so, and then there's these continuing transmissions of this family. They're like trying to survive on Earth, and they've noticed that there's this structure that's being built, which is a lot like that Giddey Prime structure that H.R. Geiger had designed for his Dune pre-production design days. But eventually these aliens, the drones, they end up forming this dome deal. It's like houses a queen, and eventually these people, they get caught by the aliens on Earth. And this kid, Newt, she empathizes with this girl a lot, because it reminds her when she had these hope and these transmissions that these people are sending. It's just, they don't really know if anyone's going to receive them. They're just sending them out there to let people know about what's going on Earth, and they're the last remaining survivors, essentially. And they're just letting people know. They have no idea if anybody can get their transmissions. And so throughout these stories, Newt in Nightmare Asylum and in the next one, Earthware, she keeps seeing the progression of their story and how eventually this kid and her dad end up missing. And so Newt wants to go save her towards the end, back on Earth, which we shall see. And then Dr. Arona, his nukes, they're still on Earth. All right, so now we're getting into the Sam Keith story. Okay, so now Newt's like, what happened to you? To Ripley. And it turned out that at the end of Aliens, that 1986 movie, with the movie, with Aliens 3, things go way different. One of the face hugger, it gets free and tries to, get into Newt's cryotube or Ripley's cryotube, or some acid ends up leaking. It gets cut or whatever, and then it starts a fire. And so while they're in their cryogenic state, they get set free randomly. I think in Aliens 3, they get sent loose as like an emergency procedure, and they end up on that prison planet Fiorina. All right, I'm not getting at that, sorry. So it turns out, though, in this version, what happened was at the end of Aliens, here's Newt having a flashback. What happens at the end of Aliens is Ripley's explaining what happened to her while Newt was growing up, because she's pissed that she ended up in an insane asylum. She's wondering where Ripley was. So Ripley, at the end of Aliens, when they got, frozen and they were waiting to get helped aboard that ship, the Sulaco, it turned out the Colonial Marines had another ship, I think it's called the Harrison, that was nearby as backup. So really, at the end of the second movie, Ripley was only frozen for like 3 days. She got woken up, and they said, either you help us or we're going to wake up Hicks, or the girl. So they still wanted to go, here's the Harrison, the other backup ship, just like the Sulaco. This is Sam Keith artwork now. And they're like, well, we got these other Marines, and we're going to go, and we're going to head down and get some specimens. This is just 3 days now after the Aliens movie, the second movie. Here they are revealing how they had Kane's footage the whole time from the 1979 movie. The character that was played by John Hurt was the one that had the face hugger on him. And it's revealed that they knew the whole time what was going on. They had body cam footage. So she was shocked by that. And she gets sent with a bunch of these grunts to go try and get alien specimens. And here's the derelict ship that I was talking about. They go aboard. And if this is the derelict ship, so then did they go to... Yeah, so they're outside of Hadley's Hope. So they're still going back to LV 426. So they're still outside that moon. Yeah, so one of the Marines falls through, just whatever, some pit in the derelict ship. And this electromagnetic signal gets sent out. He ends up touching some wires. That signal, Ripley is back in an armored personnel carrier vehicle nearby. She gets a signal. It's sent from his device, which is designed to reach the armored personnel carrier she's in. And then that, whatever, electromagnetic signal reaches her. And she ends up like communicating with the derelict ship. Obviously, then all these people get killed by the aliens. But she's saying that she felt her strength, her supremacy. They were wrong. They actually do have a purpose. And then this queen, she's all the way on this other world, xenomorph homeworld, and she's still communicating with Ripley. So there's this new type of alien, this new type of xenomorph, and it's like this uber queen. Sure, there's the kind that have eggs. You know, there's a face hugger that happens to have like a queen. But then I guess there's like a queen of all queens from this alien mother world. So this mission goes wrong. It goes bad. Yeah. And she's telling Newt this. And now, at this point, they're on Gateway Earth, and they need to go to the xenomorph homeworld to kill the queen, or to get the queen, bring it to Earth so it'll herd all the aliens to one spot, wherever they lay the queen at. I think it's Houston, because that's where Dr. Arona had most of his nukes. And they figure that she'll attract, the queen of all queens will attract all these xenomorphs to her, and then they'll nuke it. They'll just fucking nuke that queen, all the xenomorphs by it. That's their plan. How are they going to carry the queen, though? So, from the first story arc, Aliens Outbreak, like I said, remember how in the 5th issue of this, when I showed how the space jockey, that psychic green alien, was floating in the air, like in issue, I think it was 5. And, well, there were all those dead aliens that it killed. Well, they brought those dead aliens back with them. That's what they used to line this sphere with, right here. They're like, yeah, we've got these leftover alien parts, and they got this containment deal here, this like sphere that they're going to put the queen mother in, and they lined it with the remnants, the carcasses of the shells, the bodies, because I figured it'd be acid resistant. And they would use that to trap the queen in. And what do they use to trap the queen with? Because of her experience on the Seleco and Aliens 1986 movie, they got the power loaders. And eventually, and what is it? Aliens Berserker? Stronghold? Which one was it? And I think it's Aliens Berserker. They end up weaponizing these power loader suits, which I shall get to, because that leads into Aliens versus Predator War. So, they go to the Queen homeworld. I am trying to condense a lot of information here. And here is a new type of alien. That's what I was actually getting at. These Praetorian Guard. So it turns out, I think it's per avp.com, when there's at least, I guess, 3,000 drones, eventually then a new type of alien called the Praetorian Guard, or some type of like royal guard, that will always stay close to the queen. So they're like a more amped up version of a regular xenomorph, and they guard the queen. And I think this is one of them. But then right here is like the type of alien, another type of alien, the queen of all queens. And this is the one that they capture and they put inside that sphere that they want to bring back to Earth. Let's see. Okay. And then here's Newt talking about her connection with the space jockey. There's like the petrified version of the space jockey that they showed in the first Aliens movie for some reason. But she's just discussing how it's evil, and we shared, what does it she say? We thought it shared our hatred of the alien, but it wanted Earth, not revenge. Yeah, so, and then, they go back to Earth, they drop off the alien queen, like in Houston. They're going to use Dr. Arona's nukes that he left in the first story arc, Aliens Outbreak. And just before, the clock is ticking, and now Newt is like, I'm going back to Earth real quick, to that main hive, because she saw one of those transmissions of that little girl. Her name is Amy. Now she's caught, and Newt's like, fuck it. I'm going to go save this girl back on Earth in this armored personnel carrier. Ripley joins her. They get the girl. She's almost about to die. Ripley makes this real badass appearance, saving the girl. And yeah, she's like, it's me you want. Interesting how they have like a coffin type symbol here. Yet they all live. I guess the APC is on its side, and it's got some type of like escape pod. And so instead of it jettisoning up and out, it's on its side, so it goes straight out of that hive dome deal on Earth. And these guys were about to take off. They were wondering how long it was going to take them, but they find them. Now we got Ripley, Newt, and this girl, Amy. So I guess you could say Amy's first appearance is in Nightmare Asylum, but then they find her and they join up with her here in the third part, Earth War. And then the nukes go off. And it ends with them realizing that that alien is in its derelict ship there, floating outside of Earth. And they just nuked Earth, and they realized that they just set up Earth for this alien. That's how this ends. It's a horror story, by the way, people. So it's not going to be like, oh, these are going to be like super righteous, like happy. You know what I'm saying? Here are your covers. By Dan Bovias. John Bolton covers of the final chapter, the third part, Aliens Earth War. Just admiring some of Sam Keith's goodness. With the ship's gravity drive propelling us at hundreds of times the speed of light, we were orbiting Ripley's dream within a matter of days. The closer we came, the more I felt the alien's presence. The more I knew it felt mine. Newt, we're almost ready. Are you all right? Okay. Sam Keith's goodness. Beautiful illustrations. Yeah, here's this girl again. This girl Amy, and then she's like seeing these random transmissions that they've got, and so there they have this like sphere lined with all the remains of these aliens they're gonna use to trap the queen inside. So yeah, man, Sam Keith kicked ass in this last part. To be able to have these illustrations to depict all this, you can understand what's going on. Not bad. Pretty spectacular. Really enjoyed reading this series. God, it just, and as well as the Aliens versus Predator story I'm about to show. So there you have it. The final part of this is in Dark Horse Presents, issue number 56. This is the epilogue. What happens essentially is that you've got the president, secretary of state, you know, they've got that derelict ship orbiting Earth. They've noticed that it's emitting some type of energy from it. It's beginning to terraform Earth. It's dropping the temperature of the planet significantly. And they're able to get in touch with the derelict ship. They're able to get in touch with this, they call it the space jockey, the pilot. They're able to communicate with it instead of a meeting. The president, secretary of state, a bunch of these other officials in this short story, they end up being attacked, and they all pretty much get killed by this alien. And from Earth, they sent a bunch of missiles to destroy the derelict ship. They weren't sure at first if it was friend or foe. And yeah, he ends up just like, with this by hand, he just starts beating all these humans to death. The significance with this short story in issue 56 of this Dark Horse Presents anthology is that this alien, he was dropping the temperature of the planet. He was terraforming Earth. They interrupt its terraforming process, but it was after the Earth got nuked. So because this derelict ship, this space jockey, doesn't have an official name. They don't actually have a name for its race, as far as I understand. This thing that communicates telepathically. But it is revealed that, you know, it uses the aliens to infest a planet. It waits till the planet gets overcome by the aliens. It has a technology to kill all the aliens and then terraform the planet. And that's what it was doing with Earth. So after the humans end up firing a bunch of missiles, I guess the United Americas, what was left of it out in space, they end up just blowing up the derelict ship because it attacked the president and secretary of state and all those officials that were on board. Because of that, they got rid of the ship, so the Earth is fine now. That's the reasoning behind the follow-up story to this Earth War and succeeding stories afterwards. I think the first story to follow is Aliens Genocide, which gets into another aspect I'm going to follow up on of one of these cosmic story arcs, a lot of these cosmic story arcs with aliens, that has to do with the royal jelly. This is the substance that's produced as a byproduct when the queen produced the ovomorphs, the eggs. It's this royal jelly that can be used as, I think, mainly a sex drug, but these pharmaceutical companies, I think Neil Farm, later it's called the Grant Corporation, it ends up creating some type of drug that it's like a steroid. Like athletes use it, soldiers use it. So get into that in a minute. But that explains how post-aliens outbreak, but yeah, Dark Horse Presents Annual 56 explains how any stories after the Female War trilogy, it explains why they can occur, why Aliens Genocide can have a setting taking place on Earth. It explains how stories can happen on Earth. Like, this came out in 1991, this Aliens Genocide series. The aspect with this story, well, the, I guess, cosmic alien aspects that it's based off of is the royal jelly. So it's post-aliens outbreak, post the whole female war saga, but it takes place on Earth. And, you know, how can any story take place on Earth after that trilogy? Well, it's this epilogue story in Dark Horse Presents issue 56 that explains it. Because that derelict ship, whatever that race is called, they were terraforming Earth. And even though they blew that ship up, they interrupted its terraforming process. It apparently allows humans to live back on Earth now. So this is the link to explain that. Aliens Genocide. Now I'm going to get into some of the aftermath stories and the ancillary stories that were going on in Dark Horse Comics in relation to aliens leading up to Aliens versus Predator. All right, I'm going to wrap up this portion of my Aliens comic book haul, my primer on Aliens comic book collecting. Call it what you will. So to recap, before I get into the conclusion of this part of the haul, which is essentially covering appearances of Newt, Hicks, and Ripley, and then the effects of the whole outbreak on Earth and the aftermath. That's what I'm covering in this video. So you could say then that in 1979, this Alien illustrated story published by Heavy Metal, first appearance of Ripley, synthetic androids, the alien. You could say this is the prologue to Dark Horse Presents 56 being the epilogue. Okay. And then in between these comics, this is from November 1991 cover date. In between these books, you have the Female War trilogy. Furthermore, it's important to note an overview of alien life and their place in the galactic ecosystem, discussing the queen, the ovomorph, its egg that contains an already fully grown facehugger, the whole process of how these aliens mature, live, is described here in Dark Horse Presents number 24 out of November 1988. Early Dark Horse Aliens appearance in this one shot right here. This is followed up by Dark Horse Presents issues number 42 and 43. Aliens Advent and Aliens Terminus. This two-part story follows a wealthy playboy, Wellington Frick, and his small band as they begin to investigate a pyramid on an isolated, unknown world. It's a predator pyramid. Their journalist that accompanied them, Posada, in the second part had escaped the infestation of aliens in the pyramid and, of course, ends up dying. Nobody lives at the end, but another tourism transport lands in that same spot. That's where the story ends. So far, you've got some of the makings, influences of Aliens versus Predator out of 2004. The elements in here of the pyramid that's found just like in the Aliens versus Predator movie, with some wealthy amateur archaeologist thinking he can take on the task. So yeah, Aliens versus Predator movie from 2004. Some of those story elements are incorporated. Those are from July and August of 1990. And additionally, you have Dark Horse Presents 5th Anniversary Special, which is not only the first appearance of Sin City, but there are a couple of Aliens tie-ins, Alien Stories tie-ins. You've got two stories in here. One of them that is just these other race of beings called the Reapers that come across the aliens. It's just a enclosed one shot with art by Simon Beasley. That's Aliens Reapers. The other story that's in here is actually serves as the epilogue for the Aliens versus Predator story. And this came out in April 1991. Now, one story, not the Aliens versus Predator epilogue, but the standalone story that Simon Beasley did the art for, called Aliens Reapers. Just these people trying to make a score. I think that they're salvaging a spaceship and they come across the aliens type of thing. But so the first story, Aliens Reapers, with the Simon Beasley art, that one is connected more with the original Alien stories. The reason I say that is because that particular story, Aliens Reapers, along with, because this is what, April 1991, along with Dark Horse Presents 24, which is November 1988, July, August 1990, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 the epilogue of just the whole Horse saga. They're all reprinted and colorized. In 1992, Dark Horse presents Aliens. This is the, I don't know what you want to call it, the silver, the metallic font. This also comes in red, okay? Or platinum font edition. Yeah, right there. Platinum edition. As it says, either way, it still has the Biz doing the cover artwork. Simon Beasley. That glare. Yeah. So that's what Dark Horse Presents Aliens is. It's all the one-shot ancillary stories that had been printed up until this point, up until 1992, colorized for the first time. And all that remains thus far when dealing with the aftermath stories, just real quick, Dark Horse Comics issues 3, 4, and 5. They came out October, November, December 1992. And that story arc in there is called Aliens Horror Show. It's a 3-part story written by Sarah Biam and penciled and inked by David Roche. And it's about people living with nightmares in the aftermath of the Earth invasion. Somebody that was filming interviews of people that were recapping their horrific experiences. As far as I know, this was reprinted in some form of Dark Horse, compilation, omnibus, but later, like within the past 20 years. This is an aftermath story. Came out in October, November, December 1992. Right. And then Outbreak is not the novel. Outbreak is the name of the trade paperback that came out in 1990. So if you want a compilation that is a trade paperback form, the first printing of this trade paperback had the original names. Newt's being called Newt, Rebecca Jordan is Rebecca Jordan, and you have Corporal Hicks. 1992, you had the novels, and the novel was called Aliens Earth Hive. That's it. So Outbreak, that's the 1990 trade paperback. That has the correct names. And then I believe the next time you're going to get the correct names isn't going to be until this hardcover, the original comic series, also printed by Dark Horse. So, yeah, it's like around 20. God, this thing wants to fall. So this is first edition, 2017. And I know 2016 is the first volume of the original series. And then I think the next time before that is going to be this 1990 trade paperback of this titled Aliens Outbreak. And then everything in between, the names are going to be Billy for Newt and Wilkes for Hicks. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. The novelization that came out in 1992, this is called Earth Hive. So if you hear Earth Hive, that is the novelization of Aliens Outbreak that came out in 1992. Do not confuse that with Aliens Hive, with art by Kelly Jones. So if you hear Aliens Hive, the comic book, that's about a doctor creating a robot that looks like a xenomorph so he can have it sneak inside their hive and steal their royal jelly. If you see Earth Hive, that's the book, the novelization of this first story arc. 1992, that novelization came out, 278 pages, written by Steve Perry, published by Bantam Spectra, with a cover by Den Bovias. That first part in the 3-part story arc And then you had, like I said, the second volume coming out, and that novel is called Aliens Nightmare Asylum. And then the third novel is Earth War, just as it's stated in the original comic book title. Except, since they changed people's names in the novel for Earth War, or I should say in that last panel of issue 4, when Ripley comes back, of course they don't have panels, it was a novelization. Ripley is referred to as a synthezoid, some type of like clone slash synthezoid. So, also interesting to note that the library edition of this, because I said that 1990 is the first trade paperback of Alien Outbreak, but it had the original names. The library editions, talking 1996, I believe, is the library edition of Aliens Outbreak, and then 1997 is the library editions of Nightmare Asylum and Earth War. And those 96, 97 trade paperbacks are the first printing of the names being changed, Newt being called Billy, Hicks being called Wilkes. Now, are those collectible? Those library editions? They did have some extra pages added. There's an extra page with General Spears. Check it out. Some of the xenomorphs he's been experimenting on. But now, if they being the fucking evil that is Disney, if they want to create some new set of movies or whatever based off of this female war trilogy, are they going to then have characters called Billy and Wilkes? And if they are, would that then make the library editions a little bit more valuable than the other trade paperbacks, have some form of value, since it's the first appearance of those names, the first time those names are being published? Let me know your feedback. And although this is the last story I'm going to mention right here, because this is an aftermath story, so be sure to note these fucking awesome John Bolton covers. This was just 2 issues, 2 parts. Newt's Tale. John Bolton did the covers, part 1, part 2. This is it. This is Hadley's Hope. This is the Aliens movie that came out in 1986. So 6 years later, in 1992, the same year as Aliens 3, you have Newt's Tale that depicts not only the events that happened in the 1986 Aliens movie, the second movie, but also the events that got deleted from the movie, depicting just how the outbreak on that colony at the moon LV-426, Acheron, on how the outbreak started, where her parents had ended up finding the derelict ship that was depicted at the beginning of our beloved first Alien movie, when they found that petrified pilot body. That's right. It came out in 1992. All right, so that's Hadley Hope. Classification: terraforming, research and mining colony. Location: the moon Acheron, formerly designated LV-426, one of 3 moons orbiting the gas giant Calpamos. That ringed gas giant. I throw that down as a reminder. So in the Aliens comic, Aliens Newt Tale, we're talking summer 1992. Same time the Aliens 3 comic book came out, the adaptation of that third movie. Aliens Newt's Tale was published concurrently with that movie adaptation of Aliens 3. Much of the additional material in this 2-part comic book was based on scenes that were filmed but cut from Aliens prior to release, including Russ and Ann, Newt's parents, discovering the derelict, Hicks' concern that he might get rabies when Newt repeatedly bites him, Burke's death within the hive. None of this footage made it to the theatrical cut of the film. The scene where Russ and Ann discover the derelict was later reinstated in the extended special edition. The initial takeover of the colony, however, was never scripted to be part of the 1986 Aliens film. Several scenes from issue 1 of the comic here were later included in the novel Alien River of Pain, which chronicles the fall of Hadley's Hope in greater detail. So that ship, the Sulaco, I guess then that android Bishop and Hicks and Newt and Ripley, at the end of Aliens, they had actually been in cryotubes that were within some sort of EEV, emergency escape vehicle. I guess that makes sense because Aliens 3, it starts off with that emergency escape vehicle being ejected out from the Sulaco. The nearby planet Fiorina 161, Fury, essentially, it turns out to be a prison planet. And now it's depicted how Newt, when this EEV crashes into the water, so she dies, she drowns. Now, one of the key scenes that's in Aliens 3, the comic book, it was 3 issues out of 1992. This movie adaptation comic book depicts how an alien chestburster crawls from Newt's mouth into Ripley's because it realizes that its host is drowning. This is not depicted in the movie. In that Aliens 3 3-issue limited series depicting the movie, it was written by Stephen Grant, by the way, drawn by Christopher Taylor. Cover art by Arthur Soydam, same cover artist as Aliens Genocide that I was just showing. I don't know, fans reviewing the movie and geeks and stuff, we've been like trying to figure out then, how did that dog in Aliens 3 get infected? And it's assumed that there's a different type of face hugger because they show the face hugger that's found in Aliens 3 and it's got these web digits. And it's assumed that that is a queen face hugger. It's a new type of face hugger now. And it's assumed that this thing can plant more than one chestburster. Either that or at the end of Aliens 3, I think they made the sound of one of those face huggers crawling. So it's either the queen face hugger, it didn't really die, it just went dormant, or there was another one. So it's one of the ambiguities that occurred at the end of Aliens 3. Because the movie, Aliens 3, it's directed by David Fincher, by the way, in 1992. Dan O'Bannon and Ron Shusett returned to co-write the movie with Vincent Ward. Sigourney Weaver reprises her role, but it's Newt's tale. Another unique aspect with this comic book here is that it's from Newt's point of view also. But it's the Newt's Tale comic book. It's kind of a standalone story because of the changes that have occurred. I mean, I guess, yeah, it's not really a standalone then. Okay, you can apply it to the 1986 movie. So then you could say that all of this happened, sure, before the Female War trilogy. So it still has relevancy in the Aliens canon. It's Aliens 3, that's where things separate, and you've got all the characters from the Female War trilogy. Suddenly it's like, okay, now what do we do with them? And so that's why they gave them new names in the novel. The library edition gave them the new names. What's going to happen in the future with, if there's ever going to be some type of characters called Billy or, Hicks being changed to Wilkes. So that Alien Female War trilogy, what's the relevancy with that in the future? Because it's a pretty badass story. And, showing the whole Earth being overrun by aliens. And then this psychic, weird, evil space jockey that's trying to terraform Earth at the end. It's a story that needs to be told. I would love to see how those are translated to either some form of high-tech animated movie or live action. So with Aliens 3, you got the Queen Chestburster. You've got the depiction of how the chestburster moved from Newt to Ellen Ripley. Ellen Ripley unfortunately discovers that she's infected, so she ends up having to kill herself at the end. Also with Aliens 3, though, it's interesting to note that there's the depiction of this thing they call the dragon. So it shows how when a xenomorph enters the body of an animal, as opposed to like a bipedal humanoid. That particular type of gestation will turn into its host, right? So then this alien in Aliens 3 is four-legged as opposed to bipedal. Because that dragon that they called it, it had almost attacked Ripley, and then it could tell that Ripley was a host of Queen Chestburster, so it let her go. So you've got a Queen facehugger. You've got the depiction of how this Queen Chestburster can move from one host to another, like they did at the beginning when the EEV was sinking, Newt was drowning. You got the new type of alien. The alien will take more of the form of its host, which is depicted further when they show the colonial marines on the water-covered Bracken's world. Speaking of Arthur Satyam, Aliens Genocide, just want to mention real quick, you got the Grant Corporation, and the deal with this is just a follow-up on this epilogue where the pilot, the derelict spaceship pilot, the space jockey is also called, when he was terraforming Earth, they ended up blowing up its ship, right? So the terraforming process didn't get complete, but apparently it still saved Earth. And this depicts life on Earth post-aliens outbreak. It's issues 1 and 2. Pretty nice, issues 3 and 4, I gotta say. So you got this company called the Grant Corporation. Turns out this guy Grant, I think at the end of the story, he ends up living, and it's depicted that he's learned like some life lesson about how selfish he was and how stupid that of an idea that was to go to the xenomorph homeworld. So maybe he'll turn into like a hero later on if they use him in later stories, or some type of benevolent character. Considering Aliens is mainly a platform for horror stories, I doubt it. But or some form of like dark Twilight Zone type of stories, right? So who knows? To be determined. And bam, that's it. We just went from Aliens from 1979 to terraforming of the planet. In between, you have your Aliens female war story, and then finally a depiction of the 1986 Aliens movie. Around this same time, you had that Hungarian comic. And then Aliens Genocide. An Aliens Genocide story, anecdote to wrap it up. That aftermath and of the whole female war saga. Woo! Woo-wee! Thank you for watching my Aliens female war rundown. This little anecdote I almost forgot. Insider. If you look at the 1992 issue, November issue number 4, we have got a sneak peek of Newt's Tale. So if you are a hardcore collector, you want to get all the printings, although it is in color in the original 2-issue series. I got a black and white preview in here. Aliens Newt's Tale. Sneak peek, sneak preview. John Bolton cover. Mike Richardson story. Jim Somerville doing the interiors. Look at that. Awesome. In addition, not to get too far ahead, but Aliens vs. Predator 2, okay? This Dark Horse Insider was free. It was a free promo. Came out each month from Dark Horse. You can get it at your local comic shop. Fortunately, it is the printing of Aliens vs. Predator 2, right? The first 14 issues of this. What is Aliens vs. Predator 2? How does that fit in with just regular Aliens vs. Predator and Aliens vs. Predator War? Find out in my next video. Stop by and check it out. It is presently in the works. Until next time, AVP, baby. Peace.
Step into my office.
Why?
Because you're fucking fired.